genre made field goals. And then just locking in defensively, I think we've been scoring at will. We can get to the free throw line a little bit more, get more paint touch.
In the deafening chaos of the 2023 NCAA championship game at the American Airlines Center in Dallas, the atmosphere was electric, almost unbearable in its intensity, as LSU's Angel Reese stood triumphantly over a devastated Caitlin Clark in the game's final seconds, pointing deliberately to her ring finger and flashing the now infamous "you can't see me" gesture that would ignite a nationwide debate. The cameras captured it as a moment of unfiltered rivalry, raw emotion, and competitive fire. An image that would loop endlessly across screens, sparking endless conversations about sportsmanship, gender, race, and respect in women's athletics. Yet, beneath the surface of what the public perceived as arrogance and humiliation lay a much deeper and far more human story. One of grace, humility, and quiet strength that would, in time, redefine what it meant to be a champion in defeat. Caitlin Clark, who had carried Iowa through one of the most remarkable seasons in NCAA history, sat on the bench as the confetti rained down, her head bowed, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks, the dream of a championship slipping from her grasp. It wasn't just the loss of a game. It was the end of a season that had captured the heart of a nation, the end of a journey that had elevated women's basketball into mainstream conversation, the end of something sacred. Around her, the roar of celebration and the flash of cameras blended into a hollow noise, a sound too distant to touch the quiet storm within her. And yet, in that silence, as the world seemed to watch her breaking, something else began to take shape. Something that would soon become a testament to her character and the promise she had once made to her grandmother. A promise that in her darkest hour would illuminate the very essence of who she was. The gesture, for all its controversy, was never truly about hatred. It was, in many ways, the visible echo of a larger narrative two fierce competitors who had carried women's basket into unprecedented cultural prominence. Caitlin had used the same hand motion earlier in the tournament against Louisville, celebrating her dominance with playful confidence, a symbol of swagger and joy that fans had loved. When Angel returned it on the sport's biggest stage, the public reaction fractured, dividing audiences into camps of defenders and critics, revealing uncomfortable truths about how differently female athletes, especially women of color, were perceived. But while social media boiled over with opinions, what no one saw was the quiet scene that unfolded 20 minutes after the final buzzer. Behind closed doors in the Iowa locker room, the players sat in stunned silence, the air heavy with grief, their eyes red, the weight of what could have been pressing down on them like a storm. Then Caitlin stood up, her voice trembling but steady enough to command attention. "I know everyone's going to make this about what happened out there at the end," she said, looking around at her teammates. "But I want you all to know something. Angel Reese is a champion tonight, and she earned the right to celebrate however she wants to celebrate." The room fell still. For a moment, her teammates simply stared at her, unsure whether they had heard correctly. Here was their leader, the face of their program, the player who had electrified the tournament, defending the very person who had taunted her on national television. Yet as Caitlin continued speaking, her composure deepened, her words carrying a rare kind of grace that silenced the room's collective heartbreak. "My grandmother always told me," she said softly, "that how you handle your worst moments says more about who you are than how you handle your best ones. Tonight might be our worst moment, but it doesn't define us. How we respond to it will." Those words, quietly spoken in a locker room far from the noise of the world, would come to define her legacy far more than any record she had broken that season. For what few people knew then was that just weeks before the tournament began, Caitlin had shared a late-night phone call with her grandmother, Patricia Nitze, who had been battling cancer with the same courage and poise that Caitlin admired in every strong woman she'd ever met. It was one of those conversations that linger in the soul, stitched together with love and foresight, though neither of them could have known it would become prophetic. "Sweetheart," her grandmother had said in that soft, raspy voice, "you're going to face moments when life feels unfair, when people misunderstand you, when you give everything and still fall short. In those moments, don't let anger speak for you. Let grace do the talking, because grace lasts longer than victory." Caitlin had listened in silence, tears in her eyes, promising that no matter what happened, she would honor her grandmother's words. That promise became the quiet force behind her composure that night in Dallas. A force that transformed what could have been a moment of bitterness into one of reflection and leadership. 3 days after the championship, while the media storm continued to swirl, Caitlin made a phone call no one outside her family knew about. She found Angel Reese's number through a mutual contact and called her directly. When Angel answered, cautious and uncertain, Caitlin's voice was calm. "Hey," she said gently, "I just wanted to tell you congratulations. You played amazing. You deserved that win." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a soft laugh of disbelief. "Wait, you're calling me?" Angel asked, her tone a mixture of surprise and respect. "Yeah," Caitlin replied. "Look, people are making this bigger than it needs to be. What you did, what we both did, it's part of the game. But what's happening now, the attention on women's basketball, that's what really matters. We both helped make that happen." What followed was an unexpected, honest conversation between two young women who had been cast as rivals by the media, but who understood each other far better than anyone watching from the outside ever could. They talked about the weight of expectations, the scrutiny, the criticism that came not just from fans, but from the burden of representing something larger than themselves. By the end of the call, both were laughing, the tension gone, a quiet mutual respect replacing what had once been viewed as animosity. Angel would later admit privately that it was that call, more than any press conference or interview, that changed the way she saw Caitlin forever. In the days and weeks that followed, Caitlin's refusal to respond with bitterness earned her admiration far beyond the basketball world. Commentators who had expected her to lash out were disarmed by her humility. Young athletes began quoting her post-game interviews, where she calmly told reporters, "I've got no problem with Angel. She competed. That's what champions do." Her grandmother's lesson had become her compass. Even in defeat, she had managed to elevate not just herself but the entire conversation around women's sports. She demonstrated that leadership is not born in moments of triumph but revealed in how one reacts when the world watches to see if you will stumble. She showed that maturity is not silence, but the strength to choose kindness when provoked. Meanwhile, Angel Reese, too, grew from that experience. She would later speak about the moment with newfound perspective, explaining how the intensity of competition can blur into emotion, and how Caitlin's private call had taught her that respect can coexist with rivalry. In a remarkable twist, the two young women, once the embodiment of tension, would become symbols of growth and unity, often crossing paths in the professional circuit, exchanging smiles and mutual encouragement that fans noticed immediately. Together, they helped reshape the cultural narrative surrounding women's basketball, reminding audiences that passion and sportsmanship are not opposites but partners in the pursuit of greatness. For Caitlin, the lesson of that April night stayed with her long after the lights dimmed and the noise faded. She understood now, more than ever, that her grandmother's wisdom was not about suppressing emotion but about transforming it. Grace under pressure wasn't about pretending not to hurt. It was about choosing how to respond to that hurt. Her poise became an extension of her purpose. Every young athlete who watched her walk off the court that night learned something valuable. That greatness is not just in how high you rise, but in how you stand when you fall. Years later, when asked about that game, Caitlin would smile and say, "That moment taught me more about leadership than any victory ever could. It reminded me that your character isn't built when the crowd is cheering. It's revealed when the crowd goes quiet." And somewhere, she hoped, her grandmother was smiling too, proud that the promise made in love had echoed far beyond a single basketball game, turning a fleeting gesture of rivalry into a
Being an opportunity basketball player, getting out in transition, getting easy layups that way. So she's just a workhorse, and really just the game comes to her, and she takes the
"Sweetheart," Patricia had said softly, her frail voice steady despite the weight of illness. "You're going to face moments when people try to tear you down, when they want to see you fail or react badly. But remember, champions aren't made by how they win. They're made by how they lose, by how they treat their opponents, and how they lift others up even when they're hurting." Those words echoed like a quiet anthem in Caitlin Clark's mind as she sat in the locker room of the American Airlines Center in Dallas, surrounded by silence that followed the deafening chaos of defeat. Around her, Her teammates wept quietly, their dreams slipping away with the sound of LSU's celebration still reverberating through the walls. The air was heavy with disappointment, yet Caitlin's calmness felt almost unnatural. She looked up, her face streaked with tears but her posture resolute, and said softly, "I know everyone's going to talk about what happened out there, but I want you to remember, Angel Reese is a champion tonight. She earned that moment." It was not what anyone expected from someone who had just endured public humiliation. Yet in that moment, her words lifted the room. Her grandmother's wisdom had taken root. When Caitlin faced the media storm hours later, microphones surrounding her like a sea of judgment, she answered every question with poise that transcended her years. "Angel's a tremendous player," she said evenly. She was celebrating a championship. Emotions run high in moments like that. I have nothing but respect for her and for what LSU accomplished. The world wanted a feud, but Caitlin refused to feed it. And then, 3 days later, away from headlines and cameras, she made a call that changed everything. "Angel," she said gently when Reese answered, "I just wanted to congratulate you. What you and your team did was incredible. And I wanted you to know I have nothing but respect for you." On the other end, Angel was silent for a moment, caught off guard. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked slightly. "I never meant to disrespect you, Caitlin. I was just caught up in the moment, celebrating with my team." What began as an awkward exchange slowly became something profound. A 40-minute conversation about responsibility, rivalry, and what it truly meant to represent women's basketball. Caitlin told her, "People are going to try to pit us against each other, but what if we don't let them? What if we use this attention to show young girls that you can be fierce competitors and still respect one another?" The call ended not with rivalry, but with a quiet understanding that they could both be part of something bigger than themselves. Later, Angel's younger sister, who had overheard the call, would tell a reporter, "My sister cried after that conversation. She said Caitlin was one of the